What's up, homies? This is Leon, the Paperback Maniac, here to bring you yet another quick and dirty paperback horror review. Today, we are looking at Vampire Beat by Vincent Courtney. This book was published by Pinnacle in 1991. I think I threatened to review this book in my Pinnacle collection video, and let me explain why. You see, I have always been a big fan of genre mashups. It's something that you don't see a lot of these days. They were more popular in the 80s and 90s. But essentially, what they are is, when a filmmaker or a writer would take two seemingly disparate genres or subgenres and mash them up together. The results would be variable, but usually, you could count on them to at least be interesting and different, and oftentimes, odd and charming, and you just get these weird kind of hybrids. I was looking through my movie collection before recording this review to see if I could find some cinematic examples, and I found a couple. Stuff like 1993's Full Eclipse. This is a movie about werewolf cops, very fun kind of stylish, gory action horror movie. Or probably my favorite one of that type is Dead Heat, which is essentially Lethal Weapon meets Return of the Living Dead. Just a ridiculous, cheesy, gory, funny, good time. I love Dead Heat, but I was hoping for something like that when I picked up Vampire Beat. So, as usual, I will read the synopsis from the back cover. Blood Force. The streets of Miami are hot with sleaze and sin. And nobody knows those streets better than homicide detective Christopher Blaze. Or so he thought. As an undercover cop, it was his job to bust the creatures of the night, not become one of them. But sometimes, even the best cops turned and no one suspected. Not their captains, not their girlfriends, not even their partners. Now, Chris Blaze is working the graveyard shift, hunting a centuries-old serial killer, leaving behind a trail of beautiful young victims. For another vampire is stalking the hot Miami night, and this time, Blaze has nothing to lose but his immortal soul. Yeah, that's the plot in a nutshell. So basically, we are introduced to Christopher Blaze, a hot young undercover cop, of course, a beautiful man. He's tall, blonde hair, blue eyes to rival Paul Newman's, it's stated. At the start of the story, he's been posing as an undercover cop to try to take down a satanic cult in Miami. So in the beginning, he is in a warehouse, and they are about to sacrifice a young teenage girl as part of this cult. So he's there, pretending to be a cultist. He's wearing his robe. He's got his hood up. Right as the satanic leader, one Baptiste Legendre, is about to stab this teenage girl as part of a sacrifice, Chris removes his hood, takes out his gun, shouts, "Freeze or I'll blow your fucking head off." And that is when Legendre, this cult leader, starts to act a little funny. Electricity starts crackling out of his hands. A blue light starts wiggling across his eyes. He points at Christopher Blaze, directs this electricity at him, and essentially curses him. He says, "You will now be cursed to walk, the dead of night as a member of the undead, and now you must die so that your life may begin anew." Very, very weird. And then he attempts to stab Christopher with the sacrificial dagger, but just as he's about to do that, the captain blows him away in a hail of gunfire. All the cops come swarming in, take down the cult, and Christopher thinks, well, that's that. It's been a long, rough night for him, after this. So the captain says, "Good job, Chris. We got our men. You can go home now." So Christopher goes home, but on the way home, actually, he runs across the body of Baptiste Legendre. The guy appears on the road ahead of him, but he's got like a weird snake-like creature coming out of his mouth. His hair is like writhing worms. He looks just disgusting. Chris slams into him, has an image that he has died and been buried alive, but then wakes up in the hospital. He finds that was all a dream, apparently. He's being tended to by a hot young doctor named Sue Catledge, whom he, of course, mistakes as a nurse at first. This young doctor who's engaged to be married, but who we all know is going to be ended up with Christopher. They're going to hook up. We can tell that from the beginning. So Christopher, he gets taken care of. When he goes home, he starts to notice weird things. He starts to notice that he can't eat anything. He tries to crack open a beer, but the beer, he spits it out. It tastes like spoiled milk and Windex mixed together. He can't eat hot dogs anymore. He also realizes that the sunlight will singe his skin. He looks in the mirror, he sees that he doesn't have a reflection, and then he thinks back to what Legendre, the cult leader, had said the night before, and thinks, Baptiste, you bastard, you did it. You cursed me to be a vampire. This is very troublesome. How is he going to do his job as a vampire? He quickly goes to his boss, the captain, makes up some bullshit that he's developed an allergic reaction to the sun due to the stress of his job, and requests to be put on the graveyard shift so he can, sleep during the day and work at night. So he does that. Meanwhile, we are then introduced to another character named Reggie Carver. Now, Reggie Carver is a fun, jocular, likable guy. Everyone likes Reggie Carver. He's the kind of guy that will engage in, sophomoric locker room humor. He's always bragging to his buddies. I wrote some quotes down. He's always bragging to his buddies about whatever, quote unquote, where is it? Fine young fox he had given his ebony love lizard to. Reggie Carver is black, by the way, which we are reminded on every page, basically, that he's black. But he's a likable guy. Everyone likes Reggie Carver. Everyone, that is, except his immediate superior, Lieutenant Charlie, quote-unquote, Assface Burnson. Charlie Assface Burnson. This guy is a real prick, this lieutenant. He hates Reggie Carver. He resents him for being so smooth, for being so likable, for being so good at his job. And they kind of, the feeling is likewise. They both hate each other. And in fact, recently, Reggie Carver has pulled his most recent prank on Charlie Assface Burnson, the nickname of which apparently was given because, quote, when he smiled, his face looked like an asshole with teeth. But anyway, the most recent prank that Reggie pulled on the lieutenant, Burnson, is that he hooked Burnson up with a prostitute named Mei Ling, claiming he wanted to just bury the hatchet. He said, hey, I know we've had our differences, but I know this girl that you might enjoy. So he hooked him up with this girl, Mei Ling, who had the clap. And this prostitute gives Charlie Burnson gonorrhea, and this, of course, infuriates Burnson. He vows he wants to kill, actually, Reggie Carver. There's a really graphic and disturbing dream sequence this lieutenant has where at first he imagines that Mei Ling is riding him, and then her face opens up into these hideous sores, and then her face melts off and falls onto the lieutenant's face and smothers him, and her whole body scabs up and then crumples onto the lieutenant. And then right there, he vows that he wants to kill Reggie Carver. He's going to have his revenge. That this woman gave him the clap. He decides he's going to kill Reggie. He has this sick fantasy that he's tied him down, and he's running over his body and his face wearing cleats, and digging holes in Reggie's arms and opening up his flesh. It's pretty disgusting. But yeah, he's filled with anger. Now, Reggie gets chastised by the captain for, giving his superior such a hard time. So he gets assigned the graveyard shift as well. So he's assigned the graveyard shift. Christopher Blaze had volunteered for the graveyard shift, and they become partners. And, it develops into kind of like a buddy cop type thing from there. At first, Reggie doesn't know that Christopher is a vampire. He suspects weird things because Christopher hides blood that he is stealing from hospitals and blood banks around the city at these key locations. He puts it in these bottles and he hides it. And occasionally he'll stop the car, he'll pull over and go out and kind of sip on this blood because, he doesn't want to kill humans. He's a good guy, our Christopher. But Reggie, suspects, what's up with this guy? Is he an alcoholic like my last partner? It takes a while for him to realize that, Reggie, or that Christopher is in fact a vampire. Now, Christopher, meanwhile, has been having these visions of burning red eyes and hearing this voice in his mind saying, "Join me, join me." And it isn't long before he realizes that there's another vampire out on the streets who's communicating with him telepathically. Now, this other vampire, Christopher soon suspects, is not a good guy, not like Christopher. He's not, content to steal blood from blood banks. This guy relishes, finding live victims and biting into them and killing them, especially, women. They've been finding, dead bodies around Miami. And so he realizes that this vampire is evil. And, this is very unsettling. Now, this vampire, a centuries-old vampire, his name is Yosakat Rax, or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce that. He, when he first found out about Christopher being a vampire, at first he thought, this guy can join me. Well, we can rule the night together. But he doesn't know if he can trust Christopher. He follows him around, and he realizes that this guy is lame. What's this guy doing stealing blood from hospitals? This guy, why doesn't he relish murdering people and drinking their blood like I do? He also takes a shine to Christopher's new girlfriend, the doctor who I mentioned earlier, this female doctor, and he decides that he's going to capture this doctor, this female, and turn him into his vampire wife. But he says, I'll share her with Christopher. But he basically, so he decides that he's going to capture this woman. And essentially, that is sort of the arc of the story. He eventually captures Christopher's new girlfriend, and Christopher and his partner, Reggie, need to team up and try to save her. Now, I mentioned Charlie Burnson earlier, Assface. Charlie, meanwhile, then gets fired from the police department for beating up a hooker who was actually an undercover cop. And he also gets left by his wife when she finds out that he had gonorrhea. And so he is just beside himself and just filled with even more anger. And he really wants to get back at, Reggie Carver because he blames him for all of this. Well, the evil vampire senses the kind of evil and malevolence emanating from this Lieutenant Burnson and approaches him and asks if he will be his servant because he needs a lackey. I think they call it a lamia, the vampire servant that can go out during the daytime and perform his evil doing. So he goes and abducts the girlfriend. So it's basically Reggie and Christopher against this ancient evil vampire and his servant Burnson. And that is essentially the story. So this book is, of course, awful. I mean, it's a bad book, but I can't say that I hated reading it. Although the writing is piss poor. This writer uses cliches. He writes things like, he looked like the cat that had swallowed the canary, or he felt like he was up shit creek without a paddle. Just awful cliches. There's also some really cringy lines in this book. I wrote a couple of them down. Okay, here's one. The 2000 Club was packed tighter than John Holmes in a Chinese condom. It's just like bad stand-up. Or another one, when describing Carver, Reggie Carver, trying to get the keys out of his pants to get into his car to grab the crucifix to use against the vampire, it says, quote, Carver liked to wear his pants tight so the ladies could check out the goods before they sampled them, unquote. Or another one, when he's in the shower, his shower is very fickle and, can change temperature on a dime. It says, so the cold shower, quote unquote, shriveled his balls into wrinkled walnuts. Not exactly Truman Capote there, right? But yeah, the writing is juvenile and pretty bad. The characters were despicable. I mean, some of these people in this book are just bad, and of course it's all totally black and white. You're either a hero and you're beautiful, or you're a malevolent evil asshole and you're ugly, which is charming. I don't know if I wrote anything else in here. So there's of course an inevitable sex scene between Christopher Blaze and his girlfriend, after which she starts a hot steamy shower and asks Chris, you coming? And then Chris replies, no thanks, I already did. So that's the kind of writing that we're dealing with here. So yeah, would I recommend this book? Well, I will say, similar to what I said for the William W. Johnstone review of Sandman, if you enjoy cheesy, so bad it's good horror, maybe, but that's up to you. If you could find this thing for like $1, I wouldn't pay more than like $2 for this thing. But it was more enjoyable to read than the William W. Johnstone book I reviewed. It's just like seeing what ridiculous plot development or what ridiculous thing the characters would say next was kind of interesting. Just reveling in how like despicable some of these characters were. Like there's one part in the book where Charlie Assface Burnson, he's just screwed some groupie, or like some, what he calls like some groupie, a bar girl. And, they're in bed, and the girl told him, she tells him that she used to work in receiving. and then Charlie thinks, quote, yeah, and you still do. You just received the Burnson sausage and special surprise. Talking about the gonorrhea that he knows he has that she doesn't know of. But yeah, that kind of thing, I mean, just absolutely just ludicrous and ridiculous, tasteless as hell. But there you go. If that's your thing, then this book is one for you. It's a little long though, I gotta admit. 300 pages. This thing should have been like at least 100 pages shorter. This thing really shouldn't have been longer than 150 pages in my opinion. But it wasn't like, it wasn't a total slog. Toward the end, I was kind of ready for it to end. But there you have it. Yeah, Vampire Beat. If you don't want to read that, then a couple of recommendations. I would recommend the movies I talked about. Both of these are much better actually than that book. More fun and better done. Better made than the book. But yeah, Full Eclipse and Dead Heat and Vampire Beat. There you go. That's it. That's the review of the week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I made it through. You guys wouldn't believe this review has taken me like 6 or 7 tries. Usually, I call these quick and dirty reviews for a reason. Usually I read the book, I look at my notes, I write a couple of things down, review it in one take, boom, it's done, upload it. But I don't know, this one, it was hard. It took me a lot of tries, and I'm fed up, I'm done. This book does not deserve for so much time to be spent on it. So I think this one, I've made it to the end. I'm done with it, but yeah, it's done. So anyway, if you like this review, like it, share, subscribe. I will check you guys later. Peace out.